Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this webinar today. We're very excited to have everyone involved. The title of the webinar is, But What About Recess? Planning Safe and Effective Recess Experiences in the Time of COVID-19. So my name is Trisha Zachariah, and I'm the Director of Programs and Education at PHE Canada. So my role today will be to moderate the panel of guests that we are very excited to have with us. I would first like to start by acknowledging the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin First Nation, which is where I'm presenting this webinar from today. And before we do get started, I always like to share a few administrative items with everyone on the line. So you will be muted throughout the presentation just so we can focus on the presenters. You did have the opportunity to ask questions when you registered, and so what we've done is we've taken those questions and themed them, and that's what we will be asking the panelists today. However, we will also make a little bit of room at the end, or provide a little bit of time at the end for a Q&A session. So if you do have other questions, you can type them in that questions pane, and we will try to our best to answer them. And then finally, after the webinar today, we will be sharing, hopefully within the next 24 to 48 hours, we'll be sharing a recording of the webinar with you, and that recording can be shared as well. So as we all kind of move into back to school, or for some of us, I'm sure have already headed back to school in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, we all know it's something that none of us likely imagined we would experience, and it's hard to know how to move forward since most of us have never experienced anything like this before. But what we do know is that it's essential for schools to adhere to public health and safety guidelines in order to mitigate the spread. But it's also important to offer students an opportunity to connect again, rebuild or enhance their social, emotional, cognitive, and physical domains. And for some students, most students, it's been 6 months since they've been in school. So they need unstructured time where they can release, recharge, refocus their energy. And for them, that means participating in activities or play that's of their own choosing. So it's recess. And we know that research indicates that recess is an important part of the school day. It supports the development of those, social, emotional, cognitive, and physical domains that I was talking about. And so just a little bit of information about PHE Canada's role in recess. Many of you will know that we have partnered with the Recess Project in releasing a position statement, a national position statement on recess, and it was informed by our national position paper. We worked on this in a pre-COVID-19 time. However, the content remains the same and can be applied here with obviously some modifications where needed. But also part of the work that we did is provide checklists, planning guides, and support for practical implementation of quality recess experiences for students. So we also provide in those practical components some COVID-19 return to school considerations for recess. And if you did want to check out any of those materials or the position statement or position paper, you can do so at the URL. It's www.phecanada.ca and then /talkaboutrecess. So soon I will stop doing a lot of the talking and I will be handing it over to our three panelists. But the panelists today will answer the questions about implementing quality recess experiences, and these also follow public health guidelines to the best of our knowledge. Each panelist has expertise and a passion for recess within their differing roles within the education system. So I guess what our hope is for you today is we're sure that many of you that are listening in today or watching today, as we speak about recess or you think about going back to school, you might be having some feelings of apprehension and impossibility. And what we're hoping is that we can shift that a little bit for you to feelings of hope and possibility. And so without further ado, I'm going to give a brief bio of each of our panelists. So first we have Dr. Lauren McNamara, who's the founder and director of the Recess Project. She's an education researcher, educator, social entrepreneur, child health advocate, speaker, writer, and Ashoka Fellow. She holds a PhD in educational psychology from Simon Fraser University and an MS in learning sciences from Northwestern University School of Education and Social Policy. She has over 20 years of research experience working with school boards in the US and Canada. Next, we have Maurice Hucal. He's the Superintendent of Education with the Hamilton Wentworth Catholic District School Board. He's been an educator for over 30 years and a superintendent for the past 5 years, overseeing elementary curriculum. He also has been involved in recess planning and development for the past 12 years, implementing pilot initiatives and resources with Brock University and Playocracy. Maurice has recently supported the development of a modified recess plan for COVID-19 protocols for the school board that he works with. And finally, we have Connie Adserballe. Connie is the principal of Sunnyside School in Lethbridge County, Alberta. She's an elementary school principal and a fierce advocate for improving the quality of recess. Connie believes that recess is a critical time for engaging in activities and experiences, which leads to the social, emotional well-being and academic success of all children. I'd also like to thank our partner, Everactive Schools, for connecting us to Connie through their own work in advocating quality recess experiences. So we are happy and excited to have you all on board. Before I begin with the first question, I do want to stress that it's integral for everyone who's listening in to follow the health and safety guidelines for your province and territory, as well as your school jurisdiction in recess. We know that things look differently and may continue to look differently across the country, but our hope here is that it all centers around the well-being of our students, and you're able to get some ideas and actions that you can implement within your school setting. Okay, so that's hopefully the most that I will talk. The rest of it will be handing it over to our panelists. So our first question that came in was around planning and scheduling. So many registrants wanted to know what to consider for planning and scheduling recess. So we're hoping that each of you can talk to what schools should be considering in regards to things like staggering recess, dividing the play area into specific zones for cohorts of students, the amount of recess time, and transitions. And what came up a lot was, what do we do with the masks if they're required to wear masks inside but not outside? And that kind of transition there. So we will start with Dr. Lauren McNamara in sharing her response.
Okay, thank you for having me, Trisha, and it's nice to be with the other two panelists, Maurice and Connie. What I want to say first about answering this question is, I think we have an opportunity to approach recess differently given these circumstances. So I first want to focus on the approach, and then the planning that I'm thinking of will make a little bit more sense. As Trisha mentioned, I'm an educational researcher, and much of my previous work was focused on motivation to learn and school engagement. And one of the things that I really learned is how important belonging and connection is to learning, how fundamental it is to wanting to go to school. And so I've spent the last 8 years really looking at recess, and over the last 8 years, it's been about 1,000 kids that I've talked to and worked with, and many educators and administrators. And so what they've done is they've taught me so much, and I've kind of created from that a new way to approach recess, and that's what I want to share with you. So the first thing is in the approach. When we go back under these circumstances, where all of us are going to need a space to heal and connect. And I think that's the most important priority that we've got going back. And recess is a great opportunity for this. And many of these students are looking forward to seeing their friends again. And if we think about recess, though, in the past, it hasn't been very well planned and it hasn't been very well supported. And most of us know it can be socially awkward or difficult for a lot of students. Many students have told me it's often boring, it's chaotic, it's filled with conflict. And for many, many kids, especially our most vulnerable kids, it's a place of relentless bullying. And the bullying is obviously alienating and makes it very difficult to go to school. So we have a great opportunity to create a space that's more supportive for all kids. So when they feel comfortable with each other, it's going to follow them back to class, and they'll be much more engaged with and interested in school. So this is a really good investment to make. And in Canada, it's looking like students will stay in their cohorts for recess, and likely with their cohort teacher. And this presents us with a great opportunity to do recess very, very differently and make it much more meaningful for all kids. So the second thing I want to say is I think the most important planning element would be to include the kids in the planning and the redesigning of recess. I've always asked the kids for their ideas, asked them for their help. They have an opportunity to make recess better. So what would they do? And having that conversation has become the most important part in terms of giving them ownership into wanting to engage and wanting to help. What do they need to recharge? What do they need to enjoy themselves? And I think the more conversations that we can have with them, open conversations, but also lots of kids are afraid to talk about recess, afraid to talk about it with their peers. So having some kind of an anonymous box where kids can put their feedback and their concerns. But I'm willing to bet, given all the kids I've worked with, is they want more options, they want more acceptance, and they want a lot less conflict. And so that leads me to the third thing, which is options. I like to make sure they have a continuum of options, areas for unstructured free play, areas for semi-structured activities, and areas for structured play. I think on any given day, some kids need different things, and it's important that they have options. And another thing I really learned from them to keep in mind is that 50% of us are introverts. Running outside and socializing with lots of people can be really terrifying for a lot of kids. And if we think of that, they need that space to quiet down and recharge. And so it's really important to create those safe spaces for them. These are the kids who are usually the ones who are targets of the bullies, where they're seen as antisocial. But often they're really just creative kids who need downtime, and they need to be accepted for that. And the other thing is to talk about vulnerable kids. Well, what do they need? How can everyone in the class rally around them to support them rather than alienate them? And then the fourth thing is to create zones. And I think this will really help us provide a framework. By creating different zones of activities or activity areas will help with equipment management. It will help with sanitizing. You can create rotating leadership opportunities for kids to help each other socially, as well as maintain the equipment for their assigned zones. So these assigned zones will really help provide sort of a template for routines. And in terms of how much time should be devoted to recess, in the first few weeks, I would encourage as much as possible. There's an overwhelming need to prioritize and connect over academics right now. Okay, I'm going to let the others.
Perfect. Thank you. Morris, do you want to step in here?
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate the opportunity to join this wonderful panel. First of all, as was mentioned by Tricia, the Hamilton Wentworth Catholic District School Board has really been involved in recess planning. We have a program called Lead Recess, which basically stands for linking the school, energy on the playground, all play dynamic leaders, and that's what the LEAD stands for. And it really does allow for addressing a lot of things that Lauren talked about in terms of some of the negative sides of recess. So, but what COVID has really done, and to really address the question about, how can we plan, we've had a steering committee made up of principals and some of our consultants, and of course Lynn Campanella from Playocracy, who works with us. So we've developed a planning guideline for recess. And so, our board values obviously the participation of all students in an active and a vibrant recess experience. And with COVID, obviously there's a lot of uncertainty and unrest. So, what we don't want is the knee-jerk reaction to say, now we're just going to close everything because there's so many unknowns. But as Lauren talked about, this is a really good opportunity for us to really rethink and continue to forge in the direction that we have. And research, shows that, recess is the essential component of a supportive return to a school environment where students can grow, learn, and play. And play is the key here. So what we've done is we've developed these guidelines with the following principles in mind: to make a conscious effort to foster a quality recess experience, to be an advocate for the sorry about that.
Sorry,
to
Lauren.
Promote social emotional.
Sorry, you paused for a second.
Sorry.
So, repeat it, your conscious effort.
Yeah. Conscious effort to foster a quality recess experience following the COVID, be an advocate for the students, to promote student social emotional well-being, along with enhancing students' physical literacy, view recess and view recess through the lens of the student. And so what we've done is we've consulted with public health as well. So we've followed public health and on our board safety guidelines with proper hand washing and sanitizing, when students leave for recess, and then upon returning, maintaining physical distancing with each other because we're cohorting, making sure that recess is a mask-free opportunity because kids are going to need that break. And then we've got included in there, things regarding the health of the proper handling and storage of masks. So we've got some recommendations there from public health, like wait until you're in a private or an open space to remove your mask, ensure your hands are cleaned and sanitized, folding the mask properly, storing it, and practicing hand hygiene every time, using a mask. And in our guide, we have some suggestions in terms of where kids can store, whether it's a fanny pack or a mask storage clip or small paper bags, for example, where on one side of the bag you label clean and on the back side dirty, so that when you put it in, there's a proper way of doing that. Lauren talked about, the need now to zone areas. So in our protocol, we've got, designated specific zones of play, and they can alternate over the weeks. Maybe I was hard top this week. Next time, I can be on the grass if the landscape of the school provides that. Schools will have to set a zone schedule, and then in terms of always ensuring that we include all students with disabilities as well. So planning for that. We basically have a motto of no child left inside with respect to holding recess outdoors as much as possible. And on inclement days, what is going to be your plan for inside recess? We also talk a little bit about how to separate equipment for each cohort. Have your recess equipment in each classroom, whether it's in a bag or some kind of container, and that therefore at the end of the day, you're keeping your equipment within your cohort. That's when sanitization of that equipment can take place. As well, Lauren made a good point. We want to involve students in recess planning. So we have piloted a fillable recess plan, if you will. It's just a Word document that really allows us to work with our staffs to identify a plan. And so what we have is basically when are we scheduling these breaks? A motto of recess first. Recess is not withheld as a form of discipline. We have the lead recess. We have appropriate recess equipment, playground markings, safe recess plans, protocols to deal with conflict resolution, that we want to make recess as digital device free as possible. And so those things are really in there. And the last thing I just want to say before giving Connie a chance here is we're going to have to be thinking outside the box. For some schools, based on their supervision schedules and based on the size of the playground, it might be status quo. They're able to have recess 15 minutes here, 15 minutes here, 15 minutes here. For some, it's going to be staggered, and we're going to have to do that because of cohorting and size and a limitation with zones. Some of our schools are balanced day schools, so they've got that to consider. So with those, also an option 3, an alternative plan. What if I don't have the supervision that I require and staggering doesn't work? What we are looking at is providing a 20-minute AM and a 20-minute PM by the teacher from that cohort to embed their DPA in a recess. So what'll happen is you'll have a structured AM maybe where I'm doing my 20 minutes of DPA, kids are getting, and then the afternoon 20 minutes would be unstructured to resemble recess. It's unstructured play and flipping. So again, we're trying to work to see what a typical recess during COVID will look like. So I want to give Connie a chance.
Perfect, thank you, that's great. I really like the idea of seeing it through the lens of the students, so child-centered and necessary. So Connie, do you want to share what's happening with your school?
Well, like Morris and Lauren, I just agree with everything that you say. And I think that there's students have been away from our classrooms now for several months. And I think that there's this pressure that we are ready for the kids, and everybody keeps asking, are you ready to welcome the kids back? But I think being ready doesn't mean having all of everything planned, because there isn't any room for our kids then for our children to bring their ideas and their experiences and their needs. We really can guess at what they need, but we don't know until we have those conversations with them. And then I think we need to be able to evolve and adapt, and we need to be ready to say, we thought that we had it planned out, but we need to make some changes. For us, for an elementary school, I think it's really important to have zones, because it does address the different needs that students will have, whether it be whether they need to be in an area that has loose parts play, or maybe that they want to be more physical. I think that recess, first of all, we need to approach it from a couple of ways. And one is, traditionally, recess has been seen as a time for kids to blow off steam and to give teachers a bit of a break, go off, get rid of some of that energy, and then come back and you'll be ready to learn again. And I think really addressing the rest, leisure, and play components of that, providing children with opportunities. For example, we have purchased for our students in grade 5 and 6, we've purchased stadium chairs. That's something that maybe that they can be socially distanced and chat, or maybe they want to read or be on their own or sit under a tree with a small group of people, or that sort of thing, just to address the social aspect of that. That can also be used in outdoor classrooms. It can be used in a lot of different ways. So finding ways to use your equipment that you would in a classroom, also for recess. And then, and I'll talk more about it later on when we talk about the activities, but we're in the process of creating leisure boxes that students could have with them, and that are filled with things to, maybe paint rocks or juggling balls, jacks. I'm trying to think other things. Sidewalk chalk is in there. So a lot of things that they can do, just grab that box, go out, and maybe they can then socially distance, work together outside. But creating those different zones, The biggest takeaway I can give in terms of planning for recess is it's what you do outside of recess that makes the difference at recess. It's the talking about it, how we're going to get along with each other. It's talking about how it's inspiring kids so that they can't wait to go outside to paint those rocks, that they don't get the idea when they're out there, because sometimes it takes a while to get an idea, but you've planted the seed beforehand that they can't wait to go outside to paint a rock, or they can't wait to go and sit under a tree with a friend, so that they anticipate that, because that's as much as important part of the process as anything, so that the bell doesn't ring and we say, okay, go 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever, go and have something to do, that they know what they want to do, because you as a teacher, the teachers have already laid that groundwork. They've had those conversations, and they've created that enthusiasm for kids. So that's really important. We don't need to have all the answers. We can build it with our students when they come. We can work alongside, but my last point is we have lots of recess. It's what kids need. It will improve academics at the end of the day. It will lower the referrals for behavioral support and for occupational therapy when kids are doing heavy lifting and carrying wood and all of that great stuff that they can do. Reimagine recess and provide them lots of time.
Perfect. Thank you. So our next question, it's just, I'm just sitting here going, yeah, this is great to have the three of you here and just sharing this, and hopefully people are taking some notes. I know I am. So our second question is that came up a lot, of course, is around equipment and sanitizing. So it's a really common topic right now, talking about equipment. So the question is, what tips and suggestions can you provide about the safe use of equipment? So this includes types of equipment, so loose equipment, but also play structures, how to sanitize hands and equipment, maybe during recess, before, after, and then the sharing of equipment. So Lauren, we will start with you.
Yeah, I think a lot of it was covered. I just want to hit on some key things that came up and sort of re-emphasize them. I think a really good approach is to allocate the separate bins of equipment and crafts and loose parts for each cohort to be used only during recess. And if you go to the PhD Canada website, you'll find the change guide, the recess project change guide. There's a list of equipment and list of ideas. Connie mentioned a few, just sometimes pet rocks and chalk and things are buildable things or things that they need. If you can't purchase much, think about allowing the kids and the families to donate equipment at first, not to take it home again, and be sure to sanitize all the pieces, and they just can't bring them back and forth. And then cleaning equipment between recess periods, if you provide hand sanitizer at every zone, that can mitigate the spread of the virus also. And I think the routines, right? Once they get the sense of zones and they get the sense of how it's organized and they've had their input, they'll truly understand, routines, until it really takes and becomes normal. And go ahead, Morris.
Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, in terms of, we've had a lot of talk about this, and obviously as a school system and as a superintendent of education, trying to ensure that we're listening to all our stakeholders, as well as those that are in the schools to help with the cleaning and sanitization and all of that. But I think there's a really good learning opportunity also for students, for children, right? Like what we don't want is to tell them, we don't want you sharing equipment, so we're going to do, we're just going to, just go out there and have no equipment. That's not realistic. I mean, for the first couple of days to establish routines, and we're blessed as a system, we decided to stagger entry, and that will be key for administrators working with their teachers to include in that preparation, what is recess going to look like, feel like, and sound like, during this period. And so here's an opportunity to also remind children about, what we're going to do with respect to equipment that's going to be in our cohort, and that they also can own that, to ensure that, not only are they keeping their own hands clean prior to going and back, and how then they're going to reapply their mask with their clean hands, but also starting to own, or the ownership of, their equipment, and in terms of making sure that, hopefully over time, supporting our custodians, that, whether if it, something that needs to be wiped or whatever, they could see that I believe there's a learning opportunity here. Just like in high schools, if I'm in a fitness class, or if we as adults go to the gym, we finish working on that piece of equipment, we use a wipe and we wipe down the handlebars and the seat and wherever else we were. I mean, kids can be doing the same thing in terms of teaching, that opportunity there. But again, it's going to be collectively how we do this, because what we want is, we want to continue as normal a process as we can. It's not going to be in some cases as normal, but kids need that, because we don't want to create that heightened, oh my God, I touched that ball. Now, like, we have to be careful and recognize that we need to respect their social emotional learning. And as Lauren and Connie has talked about, we need to work with our staff, and we got to work with our students and parents, whether it's equipment that's going to be donated or whatever, because we want it to be fun and social. We want to include everyone. We want to continue to be active at recess, but also to respect others that may, as Connie said, sit under a tree and read a book. So that's really, really going to be important. And again, as we're moving forward, that is why having a recess plan is so important. And now COVID, and this is heightening that need. And we should have had good planning prior to COVID to say, hey, how is recess being celebrated by our students? And what are some of the barriers to a great, effective recess and an active recess plan? So those are some of the things that we're working on and will communicate.
Perfect. Connie?
Yeah, thank you, Morris. So that's so many great ideas there. And I think that that's what you said about having a recess plan is just super critical right now. We've always needed one, but now we really need one. And I think that it will be important for every school to look at their community to see what is it that every community sort of has something that's really big on their playground, things that kids like to do. What's the culture of your recess and how can you maintain it? If you have a positive recess culture right now, I think that looking at ways to keep that culture, and if you don't have a positive culture, really great way to create one. So I'll talk a little bit about my school. Several of our students, and I would say from grade 3 to 6, a large number of them are really into basketball. And so that's a concern for them now, that how are we going to share basketballs? What is that going to look like? Well, with cohorting, we're going to have enough basketballs for sure for kids. We can easily have kids take out equipment. We have chosen to use our locker space specifically because we feel that we can keep, children can even sign out equipment that maybe they'll want that's harder to sanitize. They can keep that with them for the week, and we can sanitize at the end of the week if that's something that they want to commit to. So we're using our lockers that are housed in our hallway purposely for those reasons, to keep like leisure boxes or things that kids will use individually and won't need to be sanitized as often because they're only used by that person. I think it's super important that kids are involved in sanitizing. They love that. They're going to rock it, and they're also, that's part of being a responsible member of the school for sure. I think that if we look at it in terms of how is that going, how are hundreds of kids out on the playground going to sanitize, like getting lost in the details becomes overwhelming. And I think you just got to keep the big picture in mind, that we're all going to do the best that we can. We're going to educate our children about the importance of sanitizing and then not touching our face, playing with the equipment, and then sanitizing again. They can understand that. We'll start out slow. It will evolve, but I think that we need to set the tone. And like Maura said, we are really blessed as well in that we have a staggered entry, and we are using that time to create those routines and to get kids excited about recess. We want them coming back after the long weekend, knowing that recess is intact. And they need to be positive about that. That's probably the biggest thing. Like all the other curriculum stuff, that will all fall into place. But I think if we can just keep the hope about recess with our students, we have done a lot to help the social emotional learning of each individual student.
Perfect. So question 3 that we have, we've talked about it a little bit around zoning and cohorts, but it's in regards to physical distancing. But even within those zones or cohorts, looking at how schools can teach students about physical distancing guidelines more at it in a supportive way, that also provides space for the students to connect, as we've said, socially and emotionally at recess. So just ask each of you to share maybe what's happening in your area, or what you've looked at, or anything that you've heard that's going on there in terms of, I guess, I can't say best practices because we haven't done it yet, but more just what are some really great ideas in order to be supportive but still follow physical distancing guidelines.
Again, I think front loading is the best approach to anything, is really planning and involving the kids in the conversation, having those conversations regularly, talking about different scenarios, different expectations. The kids themselves will come up with some really great ideas, like using pool noodles, maybe to remind themselves of distancing.
Yeah.
I think too, both Morris and Connie were talking about the recess plan, and we've been thinking about this for a long time. And PhD Canada has put a body of resources on the page, and there's a planning template that will help, and it acts as sort of a catalyst to pull all the staff together as well. And there's things to consider that you might want to talk about, things to bring up that we have learned in working with teachers and principals and children for a long time. So those templates, I think, will be really helpful in talking about physical distancing and talking about what some of the options are. And I also would want to say to remember to consider the risk-benefit approach. Morris mentioned that a little bit. If the rules are too strict and the kids can't share and they can't really play, it undermines, all of the potential benefits of play and physical activity. And then in terms of distancing guidelines, for some of the students that want to play games, it would make sense to have a list of games handy that are already thought about. I actually have a colleague with playworks.org, and they've created a games guide of low-touch games that are categorized by risk level. And depending on the age of the students themselves can go through that database and pick and search some of the games that they want, add them to the list, get them interested in learning those games and playing those games together, and then keeping a list of those games, keeping it visible so it's on their mind. Go ahead, Mark.
Just to pick up from what Lauren's talking about, obviously students are going to be reminded of physical distancing, and it was a great suggestion on the pool noodle, and I know the full day kindergarten teachers are going to be bringing those in as a guide for kids to see that. But I think when it comes to what kind of activities, we've been blessed. We have, through our early years consultant, John Madalena, we've been able to, work with many of partners. We, as a school board in Hamilton, with our co-term board and with public health and with other partners, we've had physical literacy summits. And through that time, we've been able to amass a number of great resources beyond what the ministry provides for daily physical activity, suggestions and what kind of equipment can be required to facilitate that. CIRA has been able to partner with us to provide some things. So, through both Lynn Campanella and John Madalena, they've taken this time to go through those resources. And what we've done is we've attached in some support that will be shared with our principals very, very soon, a list of activities that can easily be adapted to the playground, as well as phys ed, and because that's a big part of this, because we're recommending that all physical education classes happen outside and outdoors, so as much as possible. So these kinds of things will be very important, so that, again, taking away that barrier to say, well, they're saying, the recommendations that, we shouldn't be sharing equipment amongst, cohorts and all of this, but we feel that with what we have in place, there's going to be ample opportunities for kids to play safely in the zones. And it's amazing, like, we've got principals that are sharing with me over the weekend how they were at their schools this past weekend, and and they got the spray paint, or they've got some ideas how they've decided to make their playgrounds more interactive, more fun. So again, what all panelists have been saying today, here's an opportunity to really think about how are we going to plan for a real amazing kind of recess experience, so that, and that's really, really important.
Well, and just to add on to what Lauren and Morris said, and I don't have much to add, but I think really making that playground fun, like you said, either with spray paint, something that we're doing is lawn signs that are interactive and engaging, and throughout the playground to talk about the zone and what happens in that zone, and stay tuned. There's like something's changing on Friday, and just to build some enthusiasm for children as well. But again, the work about talking to kids about physical distancing and all of that really is conversations that we have throughout the day. And we also to acknowledge that, I know as I welcomed teachers back last week to the school, how hard it was for us to stay physically distanced, and how we wanted to sit down close to each other and have lunch and talk about our summer. And so just knowing that we've worked at this for several months now, and many of our children that have stayed home all these months haven't practiced a lot of physical distancing, because they've likely been in a small cohort and had friends, a few friends that they've been interacting with, and they've been playing really closely with each other. They haven't been practicing to play 2 meters apart. And so that will be new for our students. And so I think it starts with the conversation that we just need to talk about, what does that look like? And what happens if we get closer than 2 meters? It's not the end of the world. We're doing the best that we can, and we're not going to call out other children who aren't doing it. We're just going to be patient. It's a really great lesson for us all to be patient with each other, and to know that we're all doing the best that we can, and that this is just one measure. There are lots of measures in place to keep us healthy and well, and physical distancing is just one measure. and we're all doing the best we can, and teachers are all doing the best we can. We're learning together, and we're going to evolve. And I bet if we came back in a year, we'll be a lot wiser. We'll have more lessons, and we'll have learned together. And I think that's what we need to just be patient with each other.
That's great. Okay, so the final question that we have planned before we look at some of the ones that have come up throughout the webinar is on activities. Now, I've heard each of you say, whether it be chairs under the tree or different activities or different kind of stencils or things on the asphalt, but is there anything else in terms of activity ideas that you'd like to share? Because a lot of that was probably the #1 question, is what types of activities. So if we're looking at that's following physical distancing, but also for people to be done in small spaces. If it is a zone that doesn't have a huge amount of space, but still promotes meaningful play. So I think here our registrants or attendees were just looking for ideas, different activity ideas.
Again, I think involving the kids in planning and ideas and setting expectations, that will go a long way towards establishing the rules and the routines. Creating the activity zones, as we talked about earlier, will make it easier for the children to know what the rules are, what the distancing expectation might be in those zones. And again, I really encourage a continuum of options with the focus on ensuring that the kids feel safe and accepted. I'm afraid sometimes that we'll get back, we'll be so concerned about social distancing that we'll forget that how much the kids need to connect. And again, having a continuum of options will also allow the kids who need that solo time, that quiet time, to recharge. I want to emphasize again, there's so many kids out there who've asked, we just want to be quiet, we just want to be alone. And we're not being antisocial, we just don't want to be bullied for it. We just want a space where we can go where it's safe for us to be quiet or chalk or write. Or they want to do creative play, physically active play. So again, those zones I think will really help in establishing the physical distancing parameters and getting those routines, what they can expect. And again, as Connie mentioned, I would never want, of course, what's going to happen if they get 2 meters, or within 2 meters, we don't want to shame them. There are so many different things that are going on that are mitigating. And we have to balance, the risk versus the benefit. It might help to draw a big map, on the wall, have the kids, get involved in drawing a map on some of these activities that are going on, because that will also provide a template for them to know what the distancing guidelines are, perhaps in each zone, so that it just continues to get reinforced and reinforced.
Yeah. Just to further that, again, I think we need to, again, make things fun, social, include everyone, give students a voice, again, keep them moving. When we're thinking of design, appropriate space and equipment, pick the correct game that will work there. I mentioned CIRA. For those that may not know, that's the Canadian Intramural Recreation Association of Ontario. And they provide a number of fundamental games that teach games for understanding, TJFU. And so there are a number of fundamental games that are included in those resources that use equipment, don't use equipment. They focus on manipulative, locomotor, invasion type games, target games. But the other thing that I know in having a conversation with Lynn Campanella, she talked to me and shared this free app called Create a Game. And it's basically createagame.ca, and there are 6 categories with 16 options A creative game helps to develop physical literacy, creativity, problem solving, communication, cooperation, responsibility, social skills. So again, those will be some of the things that can be used to support effective recess program. And so, again, there are tons of ideas that will be part of the planning with staff and with students. And again, I listed our lead recess, where, in the past we had these student leaders helping grade 5 and 6 students who are trained. We do a formal training process for these students, and then they help facilitate games for younger students. Well, now with the issue of cohort mixing, we're going to really need to look at that and say, hey, what does that look like? And what's that going to be, because for some of those kids also, they look forward to that, being leaders at recess time, and they're coming back, and they did it last year, and now with COVID, does that mean I don't get to do that? And I got such a charge engaging younger students and seeing and helping them, resolve some of their conflicts, and being, helping, younger kids. So we're looking at that, because I believe there's still a role for them to play. It's just, again, look like, sound like, and feel like that will be different, but we just have to continue to explore, communicate, and listen. Listen is going to be important to see, is our plan being responsive? And again, remember, as adults, we like to plan and just make sure it's done, but this is going to be a responsive process throughout to say, hey, are the zones working? Are they equitable? Do we need to change it up? Is it too boring now because, this is where you're going to play the primaries, and this is going to be your area. And after a while, the primaries are going, but we're on the hard top all the time. I want to be with the big kids on the field. So these are the things that we're really going to need to react to in a positive way. And one thing that Connie said, and Lauren said as well, it's not going to be perfect. And we as adults also have our own anxieties coming back and all that. So we have to be respectful of that. But we can't jump over or jump on or get cross at some children who, unfortunately are maybe not maintaining that physical distance. It's a learning process. Let's use common sense. Let's be, passionate in what we're trying to do, but also think with our hearts as well as our minds, and we'll make it through this.
Connie?
That was really great words, Morris. Exactly. We will make it through. I think what I'll just jump to some of the activities to give some ideas of what we're sort of looking to do, and maybe that will help somebody out. We also at Sunnyside really focus on play being as safe as it needs to be. And so we do prescribe to the notion of risky play, and we encourage children to take risks and all of that sort of play. So we will be with something that's new this year, is slack lines that we will be putting. We have a beautiful playground with lots of trees, and so we'll put them like at different levels, and that is something that will be new. We have tires, and we have an area called Tires and Tarps where it's free play, loose parts, and where we can we'll set up an obstacle course, and we'll do that with our students. So again, it won't be all ready for the students because we want their input. We will be creating with students a course for frisbee golf and for disc golf, and we can kind of change that up. So we're going to use hula hoops, hit the hula hoop, or how many times can you do this? We've got a par 3 course, a more challenging course, an easier course. And what we've kind of, to make it equitable, we've really given a lot of freedom we have a staggered recess, and we've given a lot of freedom to our students from grade 3 to 6 to go wherever they want to go during the recess during that time, because there are fewer cohorts out at one time. And then our K to 2 students will get all these opportunities, but they will be built into the sort of the instruction of the day. So it will be, they'll have those, but they'll be there with the guidance of the teacher doing the slack lines and all of that. And then when they have the recess, it will really focus on the recess for those students to be more of what we already see our students doing, that imaginative play and the loose parts, and where they're, you know, collecting sticks and pine cones and other nature products. We've got and make partnerships. I'd really encourage schools to make partnerships with the community. Make a partner with an arborist, and they'll be happy to bring in like stumps so that you can have chairs to sit in your outdoor classroom. Or like, there's just so many different ways that that you can think creatively about your space. And one of our really fun things that we're super excited to launch this fall, we were going to launch it in the spring. Myself and 2 teachers attended the Shaping the Future conference in beautiful Lake Louise in January, one of the last time that we all went out. And we heard about hobby horse, the hobby horse project that's really popular in Europe, and the group that was speaking was from Sweden, and these children have hobby horses, and they race them, they name them. There's like, you create hurdles. There's like, so we have a running track, and we're going to convert that to, because elementary schools, it's not super popular for them to go running during recess. The odd child will on some days, but it's generally an unused space. So we'll be converting that to the racetrack. And we have made a partner with a local retired man in the community that is cutting out, using a pattern, different horses, different breeds. And we'll have packages that kids will make their own horse, and then we'll make announcements, and we'll race the horses down at the track. And of course, it's the kids racing their hobby horse, and really to encourage physical activity, but just a whole lot of fun. But again, this is part of our community. Is several have their own horses, and so this is a part of the culture already for some of our families. And I think that you can build on those sorts of activities that are already happening in your community, and maybe something fun that you're doing in your class, share it with your whole school and see how you can make that a school-wide project outdoors.
Perfect. Thank you. So I am looking at our time. We're almost at the hour. But there's a couple of questions that I would like to ask. Now, I will say to everyone that's listening in, if there are questions that we don't answer, because I will not get through them all, I'm looking at them now. We'll follow up after the email or after the webinar. We have your email address, and so we can tell who asked the question. A lot of them are around, oh, Maurice, there you go, you paused again, but now you're back. A lot of them are around if we can share ideas in terms of the resources that have been shared. I know playocracy.org, Sierra has been mentioned. So what we will do is in the next day or two, we'll work on this quickly, because I know people want it now because we're all getting ready. But we'll work on putting something together, and we can send it out to everyone who's here. There are some questions, Maurice, about if there's anything that your board has developed. You mentioned a Google Doc that you're willing to share, or if that's kind of specific to the people on the board.
Yes, so if people want to reach out to me, I'll give you my email. It's HUCALM at HWCDSB.ca, and it stands for Hamilton Wentworth Catholic hucal.districtschoolboard.ca. So hucal@hwcdsb.ca. Feel free to reach out to me and we'll help you out.
Perfect. And also just a quick question that came up, Connie, that was really directed towards you, was if you have any pictures of the signs that you have up around your schoolyard that you'd be willing to share.
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I can do that. Where would you like me to share?
If you want to send them to me, and we can send those maybe out in one email or something after to everyone who's registered, that would be great. Okay. And then I guess the final question I'll ask, because we'll probably have to sign off, is really, or sorry, there was two. One came up about masks, and I guess people are still having questions around masks. I think I can answer that. They still wanted details about what to do. I think Morris provided some really great suggestions of his board, just around telling students, make sure you're doing it in a place where there's not a lot of people. Really great suggestion around paper bags, so you can have a clean and a dirty bag for each student. So it could be located outside. Again, some planning will have to go into that. Not every student will necessarily have pockets, so could it be some sort of area where a student can put their mask, but it's distanced away from others? So again, those are considerations, hopefully some ideas. Obviously older students, hopefully they can put it into a pocket and make sure that they've cleaned their hands appropriately, but it goes back to, I think what kept coming up was it goes back to that routine, and there may be some critical, I guess, creative thinking as to what it looks like, especially for those younger students if they are wearing masks. So they know, okay, this is my routine, this is what I do, and this is my spot. So this is where I put it, this is where I find it. And and thinking of spaces, maybe a lot of stuff that's coming up is unused spaces and what it can be used for. So if there's a corner outside, could it be used to set up some sort of bin that keeps them all separate, something like that. A lot of it is coming up around activities, the questions around low touch. So PHE Canada is developing their physical education activities. However, there may be some that you could look at and think about modifying. They're all, generally we're working at low to no equipment, and no touching of students or equipment. So we do have some up now, and we will be adding probably about 5 more a week for the next 4 weeks that you might be able to modify if you need them. Okay, so the one question I wanted to ask before we sign off is around that playground equipment. So have you heard anything about playground equipment, or do you have I guess policies or guidelines in place? So Morris, maybe I'll start with you about what's happening in your board around actual playground structures I'm talking about.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah, on our playgrounds, we do not have playground structures. Unfortunately, years ago, the ones that we did, they were not in good condition, so they were moved. But we also, in our FDK areas, we do have loose parts and nice tree stumps and including and allowing for creative play. So there are some guidelines around that. We do have one of my schools that did get a grant, and they really helped spruce up their yard. There's some rocks that they can climb on and stuff like that. So again, we'll be working to talk about that. But if you look at a lot of the guidelines and stuff like that, it's nothing like those have to be sanitized. It's more for the plastic structures or metal bars or monkey bar. We don't have that. We don't have swings or anything like that. That's not to say that the parkettes that might be adjacent to schools, so those are the things that, we're going to really have to look at. But for the most part, we don't have a lot of those kind of structures.
Okay. Connie, do you have anything to add there?
Not really. Our playgrounds in Alberta were closed down and then reopened again. They were closed in March and then reopened again in June. And so the playgrounds remain open. And so I think that there has been an understanding again around sanitizing before you use the playground and then sanitizing again after. I think that that's probably going to be the best best use. Again, those little students who have looked so forward to playing on the playground, the last thing we want to do is say, welcome back, but you're not playing on that playground. So I think we'll continue to play on the playground. I think that our plan has been communicated to parents. They know that this is the plan. If they have a concern with that, we can certainly address it. Our community is okay with it at this point, and we'll just really emphasize the hand washing before they go outside, or the sanitizing, and as soon as you come in from the playground.
Yeah, and I think I mean, just for schools that do have play structures, again, that's going to go back to whatever the school or the board or district is saying about play structures. And if they haven't thought about it, then this is a time to approach someone to think about it and what that looks like. Yeah. And again, it goes to everything, who's responsible. And that's I know Lauren and I have had lots of conversations about that in general, is who's responsible for recess. So we know, I mean, all the work that the three of you have done is showing that you've taken care to consider who's responsible for recess, but now and beyond COVID, we need to do that. And so if that question hasn't been answered, then I suggest going to administration or whoever to get that answer. If you think that that's how students will get quality play experiences, then I think it's needed. So. Okay, so I'm just looking at our time and I'm conscious of everyone's day, including you three that are on the line with us as panelists. So I mean, I just want to take the time and give a heartfelt thank you to the three of you for joining us today, providing us with the knowledge and inspiration, definitely for COVID and beyond, and how to move forward. I also want to say to our attendees, everyone who took the time out of your busy day, thank you for joining us. We will, as I said, answer any questions unanswered. We will send the resources as we can collect them, and send you a list. I don't like the idea of saying good luck, because I don't think it's luck. We're going to say that you will do great, and that we believe in all of you. So yes, thank you, and we'll be thinking of you, of course, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, everyone.